Welcome to another AIM session here online. And today we're going to talk about how to do up a conference abstract. And these are very simple things, and hopefully this won't take you too much time and you won't be too nervous about it or too worried about how you do it. It's a very straightforward kind of thing. So in the text that we're going to use today, if you see blue text, those are instructions and comments about a section. You wouldn't actually use those. You want to use the stuff more in black standard font that you'll see. We're going to do a basic standard abstract. Each conference will vary a little bit, but the core sections really don't change much. The size might change. Some conferences might keep it very tight at 200, 250 words. Some will be much more expansive, almost to 500 or even 1,000 words. But the core sections really don't change that much. And so this will give you the good bones from which to build from and develop your abstract. And always follow the rules for the event that you're submitting to. That is extremely important. You do not want to wander off into left field when it comes towards the rules. They put them in for a reason. Those reasons usually are that they're trying to format those things into an actual supplement for the journal that's with the society at the conference that you're presenting to, or they're going to use it for generating an app or an online thing that's searchable that people can use. So if you don't follow the rules, you're really setting yourself up to be rejected. For a lot of conferences these days, especially international conferences, it's competitive. You want to be as much on point as you can, and you want to limit how much you bother them as much as possible. There's nothing worse than getting a great abstract that's just written for something else entirely and totally useless for what you want to use. So when it comes to any kind of science writing, I always like to recommend this book, Essentials of Writing Biomedical Research Papers by Mimi Ziegler. You can get it on Amazon.ca or .com, and it's a wonderful book for breaking down the very essential points of writing any kind of biomedical research. Looking at papers, abstracts, that sort of stuff. So it's a great thing, and if you're going to be doing it a fair bit, a couple of times a year maybe, or writing a few papers a year, if you're a clinician that's dabbling in some research, if you're a hardcore researcher that's cranking out the papers, it is essential. You really need to have this book in your library, and you need to read it, refer it, have your students refer to it as well. It's a fantastic learning tool, worth every single penny of it. So with your abstract, you've got basic parts: your title, your author lists, affiliations if needed, are kind of the main background material. You'll have your background or your introduction, could go by two different names, and your method section, your results, and your conclusions or discussion. That might go by a couple of different names as well. These are the basic parts. They really don't vary much. Most conferences will have you actually label them as such: background, methods, results, conclusions, or introduction, methods, results, discussion. And for the ones that don't, it's still the same order of material that you would present it in. You just wouldn't label it as that. But it would still be your background paragraph, your methods, sentences, that sort of thing. So it really is that 1, 2, 3, 4 punch of background, methods, results, discussion. So what is your background? This is where you set up the context for your question. What is the big picture of the work that you're doing, the scope of the problem, and then you detail what your specific question is. So you could start out saying, something like depression is bad, it affects this many people, treatments are limited, so we wanted to test out this novel intervention. Or diagnosis is difficult and we wanted to test this specific diagnostic procedure. And for your question, there's really a lot of different options of how you can lead that off. To determine whether blah blah blah, we did blah blah blah. To test the hypothesis that X, we did Y. Or we hypothesized that X, and to test that hypothesis, we did blah blah blah. So this section really just sets up a very basic context. Very basic context. This is not the space to put in paragraphs of material or sentences of material. Very basic context of what is the group, the problem that you're dealing with, how big and significant is this problem, How does that lead to your specific question? What's the gap that you're trying to address with your work? And then what do you expect to find? You always want to end with your nice hypothesis statement. For your method section, again, very straightforward. What did you do? To who? For how long did you do it? You really want to describe your sample, what methods for measuring and assessing that sample that you used, your intervention and how you looked at the outcome of that intervention. You want to describe those things as briefly and cleanly as possible. You know, if you're dealing with a sample of humans, you want to say, you know, the age range, the sample size, you know, important characteristics, you know, something along the lines of, you know, we studied 22 people, adults with depression who are treatment naive, and compared them against, you know, 42 healthy controls. Or we studied 40 youth with ADHD before and after treatment with compound X. And you know, that kind of thing. You want to give enough information so people know, okay, this is the basic design of your study, who you looked at, and you know what your key outcomes are. This section, the method section, you can keep this pretty tight. You want to be careful you don't have too much creep in there. With results, what did you find? And you want to answer your main question. With an abstract, you don't have a lot of room to wiggle. You have enough space to make your point about your hypothesis. You don't want to spend too much time, you know, expounding upon a whole bunch of different things that don't really matter. You want to say, you know, we hypothesized blah, 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 blah in your background, and then in your results you say, we found. And you want to keep it nice, crisp, clear, to the point. And that sort of good stuff. So that leads you to your conclusions, and this is where you address what your results mean. And you want to have key sentences that typically start with, you know, we conclude that compound X for ADHD is ineffective. Or the difference between people with depression and healthy controls is large in this particular way. And therefore, you know, you can always say, well, what does that mean? And you always want to wrap things up with an implication, like these results suggest that. And that kind of leads you to what's the next exciting step of your research. And you want to make people excited about what it is that you do. Remember, you're selling your line of research in these sorts of things. So you want to keep things nice and clear. For what sort of writing style that you use, I strongly suggest, especially in this day and age when things are moving much more online and app-based for conference programs, that you use common keywords for your field so that when people type in words to search, they can find you. If they can't find you because you didn't use standardized terms, that's going to make you building your career a lot more difficult. So you want to use the common keywords for your field, and you know, keep your language as simple as possible. No need to overwrite these things. It's an abstract. This is not War and Peace. This is an abstract. You can keep it nice, simple, and clear. Now, a special word on titles. This is how people will find you. They're going to see your title in the listing of the conference, if it's a printout listing, or if they're just browsing the program and that sort of thing. And you know, you want to use those common keywords. And it's good to use this basic trick. And I'm going to tell you, I stole this from that Essentials of Writing Biomedical Papers. You know, you want to list your independent variable, dependent variable, and population. And use examples like, you know, effect of X on Y in Z, or Y in Z for titles. So you want to say stuff like, you know, the effect of compound X on attentional symptomatology in children, or you know, something along those lines. You want to, again, don't overwrite your titles. You want to keep them simple, because also when you print your poster, if you're going to do a poster presentation, as you'll see in another podcast in this series, you want to keep your title nice and clear so it can be read from a distance. People can pick you out, come over to your poster, and be awestruck by what great work that you do. So that's a very important thing. So here's an example. This is one of thing from my group, an abstract from my group for a recent local conference that we did. And you know, we kept a fairly simple title, We listed everybody. We didn't have to list affiliations on this one. That was okay. For background, we opened up with the context, for about a new treatment for treating major depressive disorder in youth. We hypothesized that blah, blah, blah. So we set up our question and our hypothesis. We stated those fairly clearly and quickly. So in 2 sentences, we set up our background with enough information that somebody can find us, look us up, talk to us, and all that sort of nice things. With the methods, we talked about how we collected our data, what sort of intervention did we do, and our team has treatment for 15 weekdays, applied to this particular part of the brain. In who? What was our sample? In this case, it was a pilot report from our sample where we talked about how it was 16 youth with treatment-resistant depression between these ages. So what did we do to who? Very simple, very quick, punchy thing. We didn't get too bogged down in trying to make sure we could explain every detail. When you present your data at the conference, people will come up to you and ask you if they want to know which depression scale you used or which particular statistical approach. They can ask you, and you can talk them through it, and then you can make a great contact that way. With the results section, this is where you start to get into the meat. You want to keep it as clean and just talk about what you found, and boom, 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 boom. Just hit your points and then move on. Conclusions, nice summary statement, and then with a bit of your potential implication coming out of your main finding. So you want to keep it nice and clean and simple. And when you're writing these abstracts, a lot of people can have the tyranny of the blank page where they're sitting there with Microsoft Word or iWork pages opened up and they just don't know where to start. Really treat it like a recipe and write it like that and hit each little section at a time. And if you're a junior person just starting out, hand it off to someone who's a bit more experienced that and ask them to do a quick read of it. Can't hurt, can only help. And your abstracts will be stronger for it typically. You want to keep it clean, simple, but with enough coverage that people can find your work and then talk to you about it. And you can build your prominence in your field and push your research program forward. And that's what really matters. So thank you for listening to this AIMS session on abstracts, and thank you very much.